My friends, we have with us today Dr. Rich McCormick. Dr. McCormick was referred to me by our friend and esteemed brother, Major General Livingston. And just as a headline, Dr. Rich McCormick is a decorated Marine helicopter pilot. He's now a nighttime emergency room doctor who serves, of course, on the front lines of the battle against COVID. His ER stardom takes place in Gwinnett County. A little more detailed information on Dr. Rich McCormick. He served over 20 years as a Marine and in the Navy, over 20 years in the U.S. Marine Corps and in the Navy. He served in combat zones in Africa, the Persian Gulf, and Afghanistan. As a Marine, he flew helicopters and taught at Georgia Tech and Morehouse College as the Marine officer instructor. In the Navy, he earned the rank of commander, and he served, get this, he served as the department head for the emergency medicine department in Kandahar. I'm going to say that again. Served as the department head for the emergency medicine department in Kandahar. He's a graduate of the Morehouse School of Medicine, where he was also elected student body president. He completed his residency in emergency medicine through Emory University Hospital while training at Grady Hospital. He also has earned an MBA from National University in California. Adding to his distinguished accomplishments are that he won his semifinal round in the American Gladiator competition. I was always a fan of that. Skip sent the coming attractions email, which has a link. You'll see Rich competing against a fellow Marine and winning in that competition. And furthermore, Rich actually appeared in the now famous chessboard recruitment ad for the United States Marine Corps. You'll see him in there. Skip put all of that in the Meet Our Coming Attractions email, which he sent yesterday. So a man who I call a friend, he refers to me as a remote acquaintance, but I call him a friend, a man who indeed marched to the sound of the guns in Afghanistan and is marching to the sound of the guns now in the battle against COVID. Dr. Rich McCormick. Rich?
Well, thanks. So very generous introduction. I appreciate you, Vincent. Thank you for having me here today. You guys are my heroes. I think I had it easy compared to you. I really mean that sincerely. I'm not saying that humbly, but I've been able to serve great heroes, both from the past in the ER and also those people who I've carried around the back of my helicopter, taking them off to places they needed to go. I feel like the guy behind the guy, and I'm sincerely humbled just to be part of that machine. We always say that the green machine has, we're all shades of green, we all bleed red, but we are brothers. And growing up the way I did, a third generation military pilot, I'm just very humbled to be part of this history, and thank you for all leading the way and setting the bar for all the rest of us. Thank you for your incredible service, especially in Vietnam, which I still consider today the hardest war to fight and the hardest war to come home from. We got a little taste of that in Afghanistan, but I get it, and I understand your struggles. You guys have set an example on how to continue to excel and deal with problems that I hope that this new generation takes note of, because I think there's a lot of people suffering from mental health issues from both generations, but especially from our generation, maybe the way we were raised more so than the war that we actually fought. With that said, just a little background on me and where I came from. I was born in Vegas. My dad was a deputy sheriff. My parents got divorced very early, and my mom raised me as a single parent. She was a secretary when she was employed. Very humble, but very blessed. She never talked about being poor, which was a huge advantage to me, because I think so many people are envious in this life. That's one of the problems we have as Americans. We envy anybody who has more than us, and I think it's to our own detriment. I grew up very blessed to have somebody who believed in God, and it gave me my focus. I never really thought much about money, but I knew I was called to the military early. I had a great uncle who flew B-17s in World War II, a grandfather who flew, who served in the Army, a two uncles that flew in Vietnam. One flew wild weasels, the other one flew B-7, 52s, and the operations were back when that all went down, that they made a movie about serving the aircraft mechanic. And I was supposed to go to Airborne Ranger School originally. I signed up as an Army guy at the age of 17. And then I saw that movie Top Gun, and it kind of changed my life. Anybody who understands the recruiting power of a good movie would see how much that really gave a huge boost to the Navy program, especially in the aviation community. I ended up going to the only school that I applied to for college, which is Oregon State. And my first couple of years, I realized very quickly the people who impressed me were the Marines. They were the ones that had a little bit more edge as far as camaraderie, fitness, just going the extra mile. And my commanding officer there was Colonel Ray Leidick, who is an infantry officer for 3 tours in Vietnam. And he really kind of instilled my first blood of what I was supposed to be and how to define myself, my discipline, my honor, how well I should perform, and how I should never go halfway. As a matter of fact, I've never told this story to anybody else I can think of, but after my freshman year, I went to Officer Candidate School, finished in the honor graduate platoon. I was top 5 out of 257 people, and picked up a scholarship for ROTC, and then proceeded to get a very mediocre term at Oregon State for my grades. And the colonel, once again, a retired colonel, not retired, active duty colonel in the Marine Corps, called me into his office and proceeded to ask me if I was sorry for my harsh language here, if I was a dumb shit, and if I intended to continue in a mediocre way, or if I was going to be a Marine and excel. And once again, it changed my life. He was somebody who's no nonsense and called me to a higher calling, and I benefited from that. I went back to Officer Candidate School in the ROTC program, finished number 1 in my class in physical fitness. That carried over into the basic school and into the Marine Corps. Overall, I was able to get some really neat opportunities, including the American Gladiators and some other competitions that we really did well in. Fitness is a big part of my life. I think it's a big part of how we maintain our youth, by the way. And I'm sure you guys understand those people who stay fit live a lot longer and have better resistance to disease and everything else. When I joined the Marine Corps, I was selected to do the Marine Corps commercial, and that gave me some notoriety. That got me on American Gladiators, went to the Grand Championships, ended up losing to Pat Skizmazia, the international champion. But that also gave me that kind of hunger to find something that you can excel in. I was fortunate to go overseas on the 15th and the 13th MUs, 94 and 96. We did the Somalia UN withdrawal. We did Rwanda. Actually, we should have done Rwanda. We were in Entebbe, Uganda. We weren't allowed to go in country due to politics. It was very frustrating watching 1 million people die in what, once again, was political to me, and thus my bad taste towards a lot of people who get involved in something that should be solved but don't do it the right thing because of politics. And by the way, I'm not going to talk about partisan politics. I'm merely going to be critical of people who do the wrong thing in life. Did 2 tours. Then I went to First ANCO, spent time jumping out of a helicopter with First ANCO. We were attacked 82nd Mountain and the Rock Marines over in Korea. Thoroughly spending time with the Koreans. And by the way, it's not lost on me that the Koreans they're one of our main allies in our fight in Vietnam. And they had similar a reputation to the Marines, that you weren't to try with them because they're very harsh on their enemies. And actually, sometimes they're very harsh on themselves to be trained with them. They're amazing people. They don't accept anything other than the best. And then I got out of the First ANCO, went back in the cockpit, stationed in Hawaii, Kaneohe Bay. Spent a little bit of time in Guam. Once again, a little bit. Then came Battle Operations Command in Fort Bragg. I had a very good friend of mine, Marine Rugby. I played 8 years, all Marine Rugby. And there's a guy named Brian Menace, who's now a 3-star general, maybe a 4-star by now, I don't know. But he became the commanding general for 10th Mountain. And he said, "You're going to love it, but you're just right after 9/11, you're going to be gone 9 months out of the year. And when you're home, you're going to be working 6 days a week, long hours. So get your wife prepared, because a lot of people have marital problems." Well, I was already having marital problems. None of you guys could probably relate, but I realized that when you're away from your wife for years at a time, they struggle. And we had 1 child, 1 on the way. and I realized she was not going to survive that command. And so I prayed about it, and I believe being a late life convert like I am, I have a very distinct, I place a distinct value in the power of prayer and what it guides me to do. It all of a sudden came clear to me I'm supposed to be an ER doc. Now, this is a guy who doesn't like academics. I don't even like reading. I read all the time because I know it's what makes me better. I enjoy people like General Mattis, who's the monk warrior, because it's very hard to get the experiences that you all had without reading, because I can't go through Vietnam, but I can read about it and appreciate what you've been through and learn from it and how to do better in the next wars or the next battles to come. So when I was guided to be an ER doctor, first of all, I have no idea what to do. I don't know what pre-med is. I don't know how you get that done. I don't know how hard it is to get into medical school. I just know I'm supposed to be an ER doc. And apparently it's fairly hard to get into medical school. And it's even harder to get into a good residency, but that leap of faith was made. I told my detailer what I was going to do, and he said, I'll get whatever bill is left over, because it was past the due application process for anything. But I still understood that as a man of faith, I had to go ahead and jump in, and he was just going to give me whatever was left over. Well, by God's guiding hand, I believe, he gave me my first choice, which was Marine officer instructor at Georgia Tech in Morehouse, where I could finish my pre-med and get my medical school prepared for. And it's just because I had a master's in business administration. I think it's because I've been prepared that way, and because it was too perfect. There's 1 in a million chance for that to happen. I ended up coming out here to Georgia right around 2001. Had a 1-year-old, one on the way, and started my endeavors here at these universities teaching. Ended up having 3 sons total. And then, unfortunately, I was not able to salvage my marriage, but here's where it gets even crazier. I ended up going to medical school as a single parent of 3 because I got custody of my boys. Now, any of you know, if you're a man and if you're in the military and if you're in medical school, your chances of getting custody of your children are slim to none. But she agreed to it. We didn't have a contentious divorce, and I was able to have 3 little boys, ages 2 to 5, in medical school. I went to Morehouse because it was the closest school to me that I had been accepted to, and I only applied to 4. It turned out to be a huge blessing. Anybody who knows anything about Morehouse College, it's traditionally Black college, just like Spelman and Atlanta, Clark Atlanta, and Morris Brown, where I taught. Morehouse School of Medicine is a little more diverse, but it's still 60% female, 80% Black, and about 95% liberal. So I went there as an outsider and learned a lot about how you get along with people who don't always think the same way as you. It's not the Marine Corps way. You had to understand how to collectively agree on something, take a step forward, and make sure everybody feels good before you take another step forward. Definitely not the military way. Very frustrating for me at first, but a great experience nonetheless, to the point where my senior year, the same year as President Obama was elected president of the United States, I was elected student body president at that school. It taught me a lot of lessons on bias and assumptions. It allowed me to learn a different kind of leadership that I think would benefit me in the future. I ended up getting accepted at Emory University for my residency, which is one of the top programs. Once again, not by my own design. I didn't deserve it, in my opinion. Those people are incredibly smart and do well in academics. I was a single parent of 3 little boys struggling through medical school. I did well, but not well enough to deserve that. But once again, God had a plan, and I was allowed to stay in the civilian world to do my residency rather than go to the military, which most people do. The Navy had grace on me, also allowed me to keep my family in place for another 3 years. By this time, I had married a young woman who was an oncologist who went to my church, who I'd known for 7 years, and she had 4 kids. So we had 7 kids together. So a very crowded house, but a very joyous house. And went back in the Navy as an ER doctor serving at Camp Lejeune. So still stayed with my Marines. Was the assistant department head there and the department head over in Kandahar, Afghanistan, where I served my last tour in 2016. It's still not over. I think that I've been very blessed to see how things work out again. Once again, came back to Georgia because my wife wanted to settle in an area that she had a lot of friends. We ended up going from the Marietta area over to the Gwinnett area. We live in Suwanee now. And oh, by the way, before I forget, if anybody wants my contact information, please, Vincent, feel free to share it. If you have any questions on COVID or anything like that, please share it. I'm happy to talk to you guys specifically. You're like I said, you're my heroes. You guys set the bar. You guys made great sacrifice, and I get you. So feel free to share that information with any of you. When I moved back here, I started becoming an ER doc in the civilian world, which is kind of a dream job. You make more money doing less than you ever do in the military, that's for sure. Most of you have understood the benefits of being a businessman and what America has to offer. I'm very fortunate to live in the greatest country of the world's ever seen. I got involved a little bit, and this isn't going to be a political statement, but I'm going to talk about going down to the Capitol and trying to, as a bipartisan group of doctors called the Medical Association of Georgia, solve surprise billing, which probably over half of you experience where you go to the hospital and all of a sudden you get a bill that should have been paid for. It's a simple fix and it should have been easy to fix, but the legislation down there was very resistant to that because there's special interests involved. And so that got me very angry enough to end up running for Congress. And as an outsider who was running against two millionaires and a state senator who had never lost in 33 years, we ended up winning the primary by 40 points. Didn't win the election for Congress, but came very, very close, and we'll be running again. That said, we'll leave that political stuff aside because I'm not going to tell you what party I am. You can guess. But that led me to, once again, get front and center in this COVID thing. You'll see us on Fox News just yesterday and Newsmax, both talking about this very dangerous disease that we're fighting in the ER. One of the unfortunate things is that it's been made political. It doesn't care what your politics are. It's going to attack you, and especially people who are not healthy, people who are unvaccinated, people who don't have natural immunities. I do hope that we're getting towards the end of this. We're all burnt out. We're going on 2 years right now, and nurses are absolutely burnt out. Doctors are burnt out. Techs are burnt out. Therapists are burnt out. And a lot of us have gotten sick. Most of us have done very well, but we had some doctors die. I liken it to war. We are at war with the disease. It picks on the weak, and there's a lot of misinformation out there on it. And I hope to be part of solving that in a very realistic way. Anecdotally, what I'm seeing in the ER is that the great majority of people who are being admitted and who are dying are unvaccinated. I hope that most of you, because all of you being Vietnam vets are in the high risk category, are being careful in that respect. Once you're vaccinated, your chances of surviving this are very, very, very good. I have enjoyed the unbelievable relationships I had in the Marine Corps, but I'm also enjoying those relationships of those people in the medical field who are also heroes and have made some real sacrifices to do what they do. And I'm very fortunate to be part of that. When it comes to the way I look at life now, I'm also very fortunate to see these burgeoning relationships and businesses and stuff like that. You guys are a big part of that. I understand your choices that you've made as a group of people from a common experience that have been successful in life and who have given back and have been plugged in with each other. My experience with that is what we call the old breed rugby team. And we're kind of dealing with similar things to what you are. And let me make that analogy. You're seeing people at your age now getting sick and dying. And it's interesting. I never thought I'd be at that age, but I'm there. I'm over 50 years old now. And we are in a team of rugby players that played Marine Corps rugby together. There's probably over 100 of us. We've lost 38 Marines since 9/11 to various things, not all war. And just like you guys lose your friends just to war, to disease and to heart attacks and strokes. We had one guy die drunk in a jail in Mexico. We had another guy commit suicide. We had another guy, just on the 4th of July, one of our most fit and amazing Marines choked on a sausage at the 4th of July party. Just tragic. And yet we prevailed together. We continue to stay together. We pray together. We get together on a regular occasion so we can have that common bond and support each other going forward. So I appreciate what you have, and I try to emulate that in my experiences also, because there's nothing like your comrades in arms to that people will understand you and move forward with you and support you regardless of who you are. And so thank you for this organization and taking time to listen to my little story, which I consider insignificant to most of your success. And I'm just blessed to be here. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Rich. We really appreciate it. We appreciate you and all you do. We're going to open this up for questions. So if there's anybody that has any questions for.
I have a question.
Go.
Okay. Really appreciated your conversation with us there. Actually, I've got about 4 or 5 questions, but let me ask you this one. I have 2 adult children in their early to mid 50s who are adamant that they're not going to take this vaccination. Now, they're both in good health. They have no serious problems other than things like back trouble and so on, but they've been turned off by the politicization of this business. What would you say to them?
So this is the interesting thing. I'm seeing a few of those people turn. By the way, I have 2 young men too. I have 3 boys, but 2 of them are going in the Marine Corps in the near future. And it's funny, we try to guide our children, but they kind of do whatever they want to do anyways. Yeah. It feels like we do when they give us advice. But what I've been doing is just trying to turn back to the gentle approach. Most people resist it. The more you push something, the more people get suspicious about it. And there's so much information on the internet that really is misleading. There's a guy named Dr. Stock that 20 people sent me his video that he had a 3-minute presentation about this disease. And the 15 people he treated with ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and have you. And I was like, well, that's great if you're a primary care provider who treats the less sick people. But I'm an ER doctor who's treated thousands of people. Right. And they're already sick when I see them. So there's a big difference between those people who go to a primary care physician because they're a little bit sick from a disease. And of course, they're going to survive and they're going to do well, versus the huge glut of people who get very sick, who have to come to the ER. And I'm not saying that the vast majority of people in America are getting sick, but the people I see are sick. And when you get sick, if you're sick enough to actually come to the hospital and be hospitalized and be in jeopardy of dying, and by the way, today there'll probably be another guy who dies who's going to be a politician's dad in his early 70s because he didn't want to get the vaccination because of all the things he'd read. And by the way, I take very much offense to those doctors who say, well, I'm not going to treat those patients who don't get vaccination because they put themselves and others at risk. Well, where are those same politicians when you're treating all the smokers and obese and drug users and alcoholics and hypertensive, all the people who mistreat their body anyway? We do that every single day. As a matter of fact, 75% of the people that we treat have done it to themselves. Sure. So I think it's hypocrisy. With that, all that said, what I do is I use the soft sell approach for those kind of people. I say, look, I get your concerns, but everything's a percentage game, right? Everything, if I treat you for an ear infection with antibiotics, it may harm you, or it may benefit you based on how bad your ear looks. If I think it's bacterial versus viral, who you are, how old you are, what kind of reactions you might have to medications, everything's a percentage game. And so I play a percentage game. That's why in Europe, they don't treat unless you're bulging, and they'll treat just is the wrong approach. We actually kill and hurt people every year because we use too many antibiotics. And so we don't always play percentage games, but we should. And when it comes to the percentage of people that are harmed versus benefited by this vaccination, it's not even close. It's 1,000 to 1. I mean, yes, I get that most people are going to survive this disease, but of those great number of people who are going to get ill or spend time in the hospital, miss work, feel like they're going to die, that could all be avoided by just 1 little shot or 2 little shots in this case. And just the benefit versus the risk. The risk, if you're going to have an adverse reaction to this vaccination, and this is an important thing to understand, you're probably going to have a worse reaction to the disease because the autoimmune response that you're having to the vaccination is what makes you sick. You're going to have an even worse reaction to the disease, whether it's clots or inflammation. The things that make you feel badly when you get a vaccination are the things that make you feel even worse with the actual disease process. So yes, I understand there are some side effects for people who get the vaccination, but almost universally, those same side effects will be worse with the disease. Just like your immunity is also better with the disease than the vaccination because you're getting a more complete response. So understanding the science behind it, maybe makes people alleviate what they think is a risk when in actuality, the same risk they're having for this. Now, every once in a while you get a contaminated batch. I get that. They had 3 people die in Japan from a contaminated Moderna batch. That's exceedingly rare. Think about it. We've given 1 billion different shots and 3 people die and people are like, oh, see, that's why you didn't get the vaccination. No. That's not the percentages. We always play. If you go to bet in Vegas, you don't not take a hit. If you have 7 in your hand, you're going for 21, you take another hit. We always play percentages, and those people who don't get the vaccination are actually playing against the odds. That's what I was trying to make the case is every single patient I've admitted to the hospital in the last 2 months has been unvaccinated. Right. Every single one. And I've never, ever admitted a patient who had been vaccinated because of a side effect of the vaccination. So, and that's after 1.5 years. So I just want to make that point. What I'm seeing anecdotally, what doctors are seeing anecdotally is that this is a disease of the unvaccinated at this point. And that's all there's to it.
I have another question. My wife and I are concierge medicine clients, and our primary care doc encouraged us to take the vaccination, which we did in January and February, got the 2 shots, Moderna. Then he tested our antibodies through a blood test about 6 weeks later, and we were both in the safe zone. And in a recent physical about 3 weeks ago, my wife's blood test showed that her antibodies had almost doubled. And so he said, as long as your antibodies are strong, you do not need the booster. How would you react to that?
Concur 100%. So if you have a robust reaction, in matter of fact, this is the great thing I have with concierge medicine and people who have good healthcare. If you can test for the antibodies, you don't have to get the booster shot. Now it's a little more expensive to do it that way because not everybody can afford that. It's a lot easier to just get basically a free shot that everybody can get. But if you have antibodies, you're actually probably taking a higher risk by getting a booster shot, quite frankly. And the reason I say that is because you're now exposing yourself to a hyperimmune reaction. And this is why I don't like politicians getting involved in this conversation, because if you just make a blanket statement that you should get the booster, but like you and your wife, for example, have this great robust immune response still, then you could actually have an immune response versus this vaccination, which it's going to recognize as a disease. And then you can increase your chances of clotting and other kind of sicknesses just as a reaction to the vaccination. So I would say if you have the immunity, and some of us, because we've been re-exposed since we got the vaccination, if you have the immunity size, this is my dog, my wife's dog, I should say. I don't. He's pestering me.
We got a lot of dog people here, so that's super. It looks like Dan Bennett, did you have a question?
I had the 2 Pfizer shots, Dr. McCormick, back in April, and I came down with one hell of a case of COVID. The whole month of August, I was completely out of it. I can't imagine what would have happened if I didn't have those shots. I'd probably been dead by now. But I had the infusion. I had the antibody infusion, and within 2 weeks, I started feeling a lot better. So you would recommend me not taking the booster?
So ideally you could get tested for the antibodies. Now realize too that some people have what's called T-cell immunity, and that's what I do. So I never built the same antibodies as a lot of people do because my body responds different to the disease. I never really got sick, and I've been exposed to this over and over again. I think that's genetic. Some of us have different kind of immunity. Some of us have different receptors, and that's why I say this is worth a conversation with individual doctors. Not everybody has great access to healthcare, but if you still have the antibodies, and especially if you're inside of 6 months, no, I don't think you need a booster because nobody seems to be getting sick inside of 6 months of a recovery. You're probably going to have the most complete immunity of anybody until that 6 months runs. Now, once you get past 6 months, it seems to wane anywhere from 8 to 10 months after you've had the disease or the vaccination, where you start to lose your immunity somewhat. But some people maintain it because they've been re-exposed. Some people just have a different genetic profile where they keep the immunity for a longer period of time. But that's really, the safe zone is up to about 8 months. After that, it becomes more questionable about your re-exposure and your genetics.
Thank you.
Sir.
Thanks, Dr. McCormick. Kerry King, I think you were next.
Oh, thanks, Skip. Doc, I've got a couple of questions. The first is just as a layperson observing people that I see on TV that are suffering from the disease, or to some extent, people I know that were suffering from it. It appears to me that there's a link between the people that don't make it and obesity, regardless of their age. That seems to be a direct link from what I observed. The other thing is I had my booster shot about 3 weeks ago. I don't know how I got it. I walked in to a Publix pharmacy and I said, "Are you guys giving the booster?" They said, "Yes." So I had the Moderna booster. My question is, first of all, is the booster, it's a two-part question. Is the booster the same thing as the original vaccine, or is it a new product? And secondly, 8 months from now, again, am I going to have another booster? Or if you could answer those. And thank you for coming on, and thanks for your Marine Corps service. Even though I was Army, I did deal with a lot of Marines. So, and my best friend's Larry Taylor, who I'm sure you knew when you were at Georgia Tech teaching.
Yes, I tell you, those relationships are a beautiful thing, and thank you for saying that. I'll take those in order. Yes, obesity is the biggest risk factor there is, followed by all the things that obesity can cause: diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, lung disease, especially is very hard because you lose your reserves, so you don't have once you get inflamed lungs, of course, if you're a COPD or a smoker, it just doesn't give you any reserve to fight off. But yeah, obesity seems to be the biggest single risk factor, because I think it causes other problems in your body too. Plus, it makes it harder for you to lift your chest when you're breathing, which you need that reserve to take on big breaths when you're struggling to breathe. As far as the Moderna or any other booster shot, yes, it is the same right now, but I don't think it will be in the future, because you're seeing with the Delta variant and the Mu variants, just like with influenza shots that we get every year, they've actually made those into the 17 most common or whatever for that year. They'll take a sample of what people are coming down with, then they'll replicate those for that specific year. And what I think is this going to become an annual booster, just like influenza, where you take the most common strains, the most deadly strains, and gear those vaccinations towards those, just like we do with influenza. Now, realize on an average year, about 30,000 people die of influenza. On a bad year where we don't have as effective of a vaccination, where we guessed wrong, if you will, we have up to 70,000 people die of influenza per year. People forget that. But I think it's going to be similar to that. Right now, the booster shot is similar to what we had before, if not the same. But I think future booster shots will be different. And I think it will be anywhere from 8 months to a year. I think it'll be more like an annual thing, because I don't think people want to try to remember 8 months. But that's my hunch as far as we move forward. We haven't made a determination on that yet, but especially with high-risk patients, I think, once again, this is a great discussion to have with your doctor if you have those means.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Sure.
Rich. It looks like Jay Pryor has his hand up. Jay, unmute yourself.
Yes, my wife and I have two grandsons. One's 8, one's 11. What is your opinion about youngsters being vaccinated?
Absolutely not. Anybody under 12 is extremely low risk. You know, there's certain people out there that have maybe some sort of genetic weird thing, but by and large, those same kids that would be in trouble from COVID would be in trouble from anything, because certain kids just don't have the hardiness. And we know this is not that we're a Spartan society or anything like that, but we know that certain people just have bad genetics. They're not the people that serve in the military. They're people that have to be kind of watched after for everything. But by and large, this disease has not picked on young people at all. They talked about the Delta variant making some kids sick and dying. Yes, I get that. But it's still proved to be far less deadly than any influenza pandemic we've ever had. People also forget that in 1918, right after World War I, we had the Spanish flu ravage the world, where 25 million people died in 25 weeks. 25 million people. That's way more than this disease when it was a novel virus. The reason that it's called Spanish flu, just historical for those people who are history buffs, is not because Spain started it, but because they were one of the few countries that were neutral during World War I. And so after World War I, when they're doing reporting on this disease, a lot of people underreported the number of cases they had because people were freaking out over the World War I deaths already. And Spain, since they were neutral, actually did accurate counting of their pandemic numbers. And so it made it look like they were the epicenter. But long story short, I think we're going to get to the end of this third wave and have some sort of immunity for all those people who have either had the vaccination or been exposed over and over again and gotten really ill. But for some reason, we still haven't turned the corner on that yet.
Great. Thank you. Alan Gravel.
I've heard that people with O positive blood have less likelihood to get this disease. Is that true?
I have not seen the same. I heard that too. I've heard a lot of rumors. I don't know that there's a direct correlation between blood type and immunity. I will say that there does seem to be some genetic component to this, because it doesn't make sense that a 90-year-old guy who has comorbidities does very well against this, and then a 25-year-old guy who doesn't have any health problems doesn't do well. Some of it has to do with the viral load that you're exposed to begin with, just like strep, for example, which is a bacteria, not a virus. But if you go into a daycare, 1 out of every 4 kids has strep. I mean, that's just a fact. Now, they do quite well with it, and most kids don't get sick unless they get overwhelmed by this disease because it has too much bacteria or too much virus. And this is where I get into percentages. You right now, you're wonderfully made. This is why I'm a believer in God. You're right now fighting off cancer, bacteria, fungi, and viruses all at the same time. That's how your body's made. But eventually we get overwhelmed by something. That's why death comes our way. Father Time is undefeated, as we say. And but I think I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought as far as what the original question was.
About O positive blood.
Yes. So as far as O positive, I have not seen a direct correlation with that. Certainly not to a significant degree. It's much more likely to have effect if you're obese, or if you're a smoker, or if you're hypertensive. Stuff like that seems to have a much greater determination. I think there's a genetic component we can't really get our arms around, but I think, just like you guys know, every year you know people who miss days of work because they're that person, and they get sick because of different things. And then you have other people who never miss work. That's the genetic component that I don't think is necessarily linked to a blood type, but maybe there's some indirect correlation I'm not aware of, but I haven't seen good evidence on that at all. I saw that early on, but it's really it's not really been scientific to me.
Thanks, Dr.
Thank you.
McCormick. We've got time for one more question. And that, Jim Dixon, I think you had your hand up next.
Yeah, question, the antibody blood test, is that something that any primary care doctor could easily do? I'm assuming it's covered by the Medicare or the Plan Fs, or is that some special thing?
That is a good question. I know the PCR test is covered. So in other words, when you're having symptoms, that test now has become so commonplace that we use it all the time, especially in the ER. The antibody test is a little bit more questionable. I don't know if it's covered. That's a good question. It should be. I think if we were to use any of the money that the government set aside for COVID, that would be a great investment to protect American lives, as far as knowing when we should get our booster shot, what the side effect profile would be as far as percentages. Once again, this is a game of percentages. If you have the means, I would do it anyways, because it can't be that expensive.
Well, absolutely, because we have the annual physical, and you could just say, look here, include this extra for the antibody test. I guess they could do that and then pay a little extra, whatever you got to do.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it probably is included, but I just don't want to speak out of turn because I'm not positive. In the ER, we just have different rules of how we operate and what we can charge for, and what the government pays for. But I think it's a brilliant thing to do, and I think they should be doing it if they want to be thorough.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Dr. McCormick. This is all the questions, or all the time we have for questions today, but we really, really appreciate you coming on and talking to us. You've had an interesting life, and we really, really appreciate not only all you did or are doing as a doctor, but what you did as a Marine and as a patriot. And we really are appreciative.